Okay, sorry guys. I was with her folks. Yeah, they are. They like donuts and hot chocolate. 11,444 potholes in January and February they fixed, right?
That's what called in and they were working
How many
on.
of those are repeats?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, I know. All right, let's rock and roll.
Well,
Go for it.
it's a good kickoff to the Transportation Infrastructure KCStat. Welcome everybody, March 5th, 2019. First Transportation Infrastructure KCStat of the year. We'll jump right in. We have our Transportation Infrastructure goal. We have 4 objectives under that. That won't read through these right now, but basically multimodal infrastructure, strategic investment, sustainable investment, and workforce and business development. And so we will start off with Objective 1, which is to enhance the city's connectivity through a safe, efficient, convenient, and sustainable multimodal transportation system. Before we get into that, I will remind everybody that, as usual, we're live tweeting this meeting and taking questions with the hashtag KCStat from @KCMO. And so the first objective strategy under this objective is about the city's smart city efforts. So I'll turn it over to Bob Bennett in the Office of Innovation to talk about that.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bob Bennett, Office of Innovation. Right now, we have seen a significant adoption of our Wi-Fi networks. Over about 2.5 million folks have jumped onto the network. That's not 2.5 million individuals. Some folks have a phone and an iPad and something else. That's 2.5 million individual items that have checked into our network over the course of the last 2.5 years. An interesting find over the last quarter has been more of the traffic that has gone onto the Wi-Fi network has actually been data exchanges between all of the sensors and the city data center as opposed to the Wi-Fi usage. What this tells us is that as we look to continue to expand, we will absolutely meet the needs for Wi-Fi connectivity for citizens because, quite frankly, it isn't taking up as much bandwidth as the sensors are. And as long as we continue to prioritize that, we will achieve the focus of doing the digital divide efforts that we've been working on through our digital inclusion strategic plan. On the kiosk performance, we are at over 600,000 usages of the kiosks. Right now, what we are seeing is somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 during the colder months and upwards of 20,000 usages during the warmer months. The primary use for the kiosk so far has been folks looking for access to transportation modes, be they knowing where the next bus or next streetcar is, looking for where the bike share located closest to them is. We are getting a live feed now of what the inventory at the different bike share locations are, and people are using that. So that transportation mode is certainly the number one. Number 2, believe it or not, is the selfie function. And as of today, we've had over 5,000 selfies taken in the last 6 months on that particular device. Over $160,000 have been received on the city side from the kiosk program to date. And that also reflects additional monies of about that amount being given to both Visit KC and the Streetcar Authority. So the ad revenue is, in fact, making this function sustainable over the long term. It is expanding. As of today, we have 25 of the original machines still in downtown. One of those machines is currently offline at an ATA warehouse because we had to take it down when they redid the bus station at 12th and Grand. That machine at 12th and Grand is being replaced with a machine that ATA purchased and is installing as a piece of the bus shelter that will be placed there. The machine that was at 12th and Grand is being moved with the EDC when they move to their new location, and they will actually have it installed here in the next couple of weeks. Finally, we have 8 machines at UMKC, 12 at KCI, and a lot of these efforts are gaining national attention. We're frequently asked to go out and speak about it. Academic institutions are working with us to do additional research, including Penn, Harvard, KU. We had a large meeting yesterday with Metro Lab, including several local universities and local communities. And companies are coming as well. At least 3 companies have now formed in Kansas City inside of the Smart City program as a generation for them. One of the more interesting ones being Friend Media, which moved their operation from Silicon Valley to Kansas City to get inside the Wi-Fi network zone. We do have 2 events coming up in the next year. Shikhar Gupta will have a blockchain conference here in late April. And then City Evolution will host their annual conference here in Kansas City again in June and July. Pending any questions on this, I can move on to the next slide. Going to highlight very quickly the Avis Mobility Lab. One reason for that is that this is the Smart City Innovation this year that earned a Smart City Connect Smart 50 Award, which will be presented to the city the first week of April. Based on the work we've done so far, we know that the data flow from the city sensors, from KCStat, and from other third-party sources, including some of the commercially available data feeds, we know that the cars can see traffic and mitigate for it for the individual driver experience. We know that the city provided data with respect to some of our cultural sites is working, and it is driving folks to those individual locations. One of the places that we looked at was the Negro Leagues Museum and the American Jazz Museum. We gave prompts to individuals to attend those who had rented Avis cars, and they saw about a 25% adoption rate. Normally, the typical push notification of a digital ad gets about a 5% or less adoption rate. So because it's targeting folks that have shown an interest through their interactions with the phone in the car, it's actually appealing to them and driving folks to that particular location. So that's working. We do have a couple of things coming up in the next year with Avis. Rick Usher is going to lead some of the discussions with Avis for exploring a free-floating rental, which essentially takes an Avis cars that exist today and uses the same model as like the Bird scooters or a Zipcar, so that anyone can get a car at any location, not have to go to an Avis rental facility. The second thing they're looking to do is exploring mopeds and these other types of technologies, and Rick's helping them out with that. We're working collaboratively with ATA on some stuff with a single application, multimodal transit, and that's working out pretty well. And then finally, Avis is actually bringing their corporate board to Kansas City for their board meeting in 2019. Instead of having it at their corporate headquarters in New York City. Reason for that is their CEO, Larry Deshawn, who is a native Kansas Cityan and a UMKC grad, wants to showcase the lab for his board here in Kansas City. So that'll be a Fortune 500 company hosting their board meeting here this summer. So that's kind of cool, and that's working out pretty good.
Good.
Pending any questions, move on to the next one.
Go ahead to the next one.
On the innovation opportunity side, we do have several multi-city relationships working. KC Digital Drive yesterday actually hosted a Metro Lab conference. There were about 9 different cities in attendance there and about 6 or 7 different universities that participated. We had over 40 people in the room looking at ways to better synchronize what universities are doing, and students who are going to sort of lead the next generation of efforts in the communities are actually now helping us to solve some city problems. We did have a successful innovation partnership program last year. 6 companies participated. 2 of them are continuing to work with the city. DogSpot still has locations in the community, and Geospiza is now working with public safety in some of our op center operations. We are going to transition the 4th class this year over to the city manager's office. Rick Usher will supervise it, and it will be run through the KC BizCare office for implementation. Pending any questions, I'll move on to the next one.
Yeah, and partnerships in the past, some have any actually graduated and moved on. What's been the status over the last couple of years, few years?
We've had 27 total companies that have participated, sir. Of those, about 12 of them are still working with the city. One of the companies has folded completely and is no longer in existence. 2 of the companies actually combined forces and have formed a single partnership entity. They may actually apply for an IPP program this year. Haven't talked to them in a couple of weeks, but they seem to be doing pretty well as a partnered organization. We have certainly endorsed those firms with other cities and with other communities.
And what's our agreement with them?
They come in, they work with us for 90-ish days, depending on the time between the state of the city and when we have our demo day. They get no money from the city for the contract, but they have access to city departments, one of which serves as their sponsor. They also get the opportunity to validate that technology with the city. And then should that validation work out and the department wants to bring that capability into their department, they can then issue out a procurement action and make it happen. I know that Data KC has brought 2 of those companies into their operations as a result of the IPP.
Okay. And once they come into the department, is there an agreement as to how long that lasts or what the parameters of that relationship are?
For the IPP period itself, it's the 90-ish days that we define when the program is released. For the long-term agreement, if they move on to that phase, it's defined by that contract that's signed between the city and that company.
Okay. Oh, when there's an opportunity to bring somebody into a department, is that done through an RFP or is that done with a straight up one?
It's done with the IPP program. So
Okay.
what we do is we match the capability that the city or that the company proposes with a department that's willing to bring them on for that period. And then at the conclusion of the period, they have 3 choices: either pursue a procurement action, or just give them feedback and tell them that it's probably not going to work out, or give them feedback that says we're not ready to procure, but we will support you with other cities.
Okay. Thanks. Appreciate it.
No worries, sir. And then last slide for me. Another fun thing that we're looking at over the course of the next year is we will field the first autonomous vehicle pilot in Kansas City. We are doing this in collaboration with the Area Transit Authority. One of the interesting bits about this is we are using the lessons learned in the city of Pittsburgh and the city of Las Vegas. We are going to do the initial testing at a private location so that we'll be able to validate a set of requirements both for safety and for connectivity, and make sure that that is consistent with what those cities have done successfully. But then we can also move very rapidly toward identifying what can work so that we move to city streets and we have to pursue an ordinance. We can do so from a place of knowing how the technology works in the city on private property. And by collaborating with a private entity, we'll be able to do that effectively. Right now, that test looks like it's going to take place up at Zona Rosa here in Kansas City. And the other partner that's going to come in with us is a group called City Possible. They are a subsidiary of MasterCard, and they will be doing some of the funding for this. Their goal in this opportunity is to understand how autonomous vehicles work in a commercial environment, like a shopping mall like Zona Rosa. And what they're going to do is then share that out through their city network. We were one of their first members in that City Possible team. Right now, there are 57 cities affiliated with that. And they're going to help to fund it for us, so that takes some of the financial burden off of the ATA.
Good. Outstanding.
And then last thing, workforce development initiatives. We have validated that the Veterans Local Government Management Fellowship Program works. This is a Department of the Army program. the aviation department now has an employee that we brought on who was a former Marine. He had done air traffic control for the Marine Corps, and now he works for the aviation department. His last 4 months in the Marine Corps were spent working at KCI. In a similar vein, Lieutenant Colonel Alex Brasco is currently serving at Fort Leavenworth. As of January, he's been working in my office. In fact, he's seated right back there in the audience this afternoon. And so he's been helping us both with the Metro Lab piece that Kansas City Digital Drive did yesterday, some of our integrated data initiatives throughout the region, and helping us to provide some long-term stability for the Smart City program. That's working out great for us, and it's giving us a great talent flow. Similarly, Park Hill has got their professional studies program. We've now had 5 interns through that program. One of them, who is a senior at Nebraska, just got offered a job to be the first Smart City project manager for the state of Nebraska and their Department of Transportation. And so they're continuing to work that. One of the interns is now working for the city of Branson as a Smart City planner while she is attending Missouri State. And a third one is actually in pursuit of a Truman Scholarship and used her experiences here with this as a piece of that. So long-term talent flow. These 2 programs are working for us.
Good. Outstanding. Thanks, Bob.
No worries, sir.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so moving on to strategy B.
Before we move on, check your communications packet that I sent back to you if you
I
have.
saw that, sir. I'll set that up with Larissa.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Strategy B is about optimizing the city's transit investment, and so we're going to hear from.
Oh, Bob, you can't leave. No. Once you're here, you have to stay.
I actually have 9:30 talk at Smart Cities with some folks upstairs.
Should have
I'll
thought
come
of
right
that
back.
before you sat down.
I'll come back, sir.
You don't need to come back, Bob. We don't want you that bad.
So we're going to hear from ETA about Ride KC, and then Tom Jaron, I believe, is actually in DC right now working on the extension, and so Sherry McIntyre is going to talk a little bit about the KC streetcar. Before we get into the Ride KC slides, we did have this, wanted to share this chart about, from the resident survey, about whether, this is sort of a combination of two questions. Have you ridden the streetcar in the last year? Have you ridden KCATA bus system in the last year? And so it shows that, both of streetcar ridership has generally been growing as a new system. Bus has been very steady. But the interesting thing is that I think when you look at the people who answered no to both those questions, that has been steadily decreasing. So it's gone from 2.5 years ago, almost 2/3 of residents, to now it's hovering, kind of going back and forth between 41%, 47, 49. But kind of illustrates the exposure of a larger group of our residents to transit in the city. I'll turn it over to Dick Gerald.
Well, thank you. And my boss, Robbie McKinnon, sends his regards. He is also in balmy Washington, D.C. today. This first slide has a number of numbers on our ridership last year. One of the things I want to point out, it's indicative of really a new direction for the ATA. Focused more on people and mobility, really different ways of getting people access to opportunities. And you can see some of the numbers here would point out the Veterans Program, Veterans Ride Free, continues to be very strong and well utilized. We have a program where persons that qualify for ADA paratransit service, they can ride the fixed route system for free, and that's doing very well. Freedom on Demand, again, a paratransit system which is app-driven, is doing very well. And what I want to highlight is our new pilot program that started in November with 3 school districts, allowing students to ride to after-school activities, to a job, etc., with a pass at no charge to the students. Good start with that, 16,000 trips. We really want to get a sense of what level of demand there is, where kids might be going, when they might be going, which routes, as we look to potentially make that a permanent program. So very excited about that. One of the numbers that's not on here is the number of KCMO employees that have used the system last year with their employee ID card, and that's 84,000 in 2018. And again, we'd really like to promote that program to all employees. Simply can use Ride KC bus and BRT lines with your employee ID card. So the next slide talks about, again, the direction we're heading, which is really to become more of a mobility manager and really work with a lot of other mobility providers in partnership. Bob Bennett talked a little bit about some of this, but we're trying to expand our reach of the system by partnering with everyone from e-scooter companies to bikes to our new microtransit pilot program. I'll talk a little bit more about that in 2 slides on our redesign. But again, looking to become more of a mobility manager than a traditional transit or bus company. Our biggest project for 2019 is the next slide, which is Prospect Max. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and several of our council members that came to our groundbreaking at the East Village site at 12th and Charlotte back in October. All of our major contracts have now been awarded. We are under construction with our goal that we will achieve of opening Prospect Max this year by the end of 2019.
Oh, good.
I would also point out on this slide, you'll see at the bottom a couple of pictures there. Those are screenshots from our live cameras. We have a live camera at 12th and Charlotte showing the construction there, another at 75th and Prospect showing the construction there. They also have time-lapse video. Prospect Max will bring a lot of new technologies, everything from Wi-Fi at all of our stations, ticket vending machines, to conductive concrete. Conductive concrete is concrete that has iron fibers in it and actually has a low voltage system in it. It will melt ice and snow.
Wow.
We had our very first.
Can you put that on the roads, please?
We'll talk to Sherry about that.
You can start in front of my house.
We had our very first test of that over this weekend. And Sunday morning, we looked at the cameras, and at 12th and Grand, you could see one panel where the conductive concrete was in that was clear. The other panels were snow covered. So far, our tests have been good, and looking for future deployments along Prospect Max. The biggest thing we're going to be doing in 2019 from a planning perspective is what we're calling a redesign of our system. And this is really to take a look at the entire system and the way we deliver mobility services throughout the region. But the focus really is on KCMO. You'll see the graphic there. That's the Smart Moves Regional Transit Plan. The details are not important, but the focus of that plan is on a series of fast and frequent service networks. Really, mobility hubs connected by fast and frequent routes that run 7 days a week with frequent service. And so what we want to do is take a look at that and then supplement that with new mobility options to increase geographic coverage. And going to the next slide, really talk about what we're trying to accomplish here. One of the statistics that I think is telling about the existing system is 15 routes make up 75% of the transit ridership. That means the other 40 routes that we operate carry 25% of the ridership. If you look at the bottom 15 routes, they carry only 2% of our ridership. So what we want to do is, can we look at those low volume routes, provide mobility in a different manner than a traditional local bus, perhaps through on-demand services, through microtransit, other applications, still provide mobility but do it more efficiently and effectively, and then integrate that with a redesigned bus and BRT network to make one improved mobility system. And one of the keys to that, Bob mentioned this as well, is one Ride KC app. Today there are multiple apps, trying to consolidate those into one where you can pick your mobility service and it's integrated, whether you start with a scooter or start with a bus, one app, one plan, pay and track system. If we go to the next one, we are on track to have this plan developed this year, 2019. That's our goal by the end of the year. We've hired a nationally known consultant firm, Jarrett Walker and Associates, with local sub-consultants, WSP and Parsons and Associates. We're starting right now. In the next couple of months, we'll be looking at the technical data, looking at the existing routes and structure. We'll be doing stakeholder work, probably beginning in May, with the goal of looking at concepts and beginning to develop concepts by the end of the summer, and then complete this plan by the end of 2019. The intent would be to begin implementation in 2020 with a new integrated mobility system. So we're excited about this. Stay tuned. We'll keep you very much informed as we go forward with the redesign plan.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
The relative cost of the conductive concrete.
It's expensive.
Yeah, I figured as much.
So it's about $85 a square foot to
Okay.
put in place. The operating cost is very low. It's a low voltage system, so there's not a high electrical cost. It's the upfront cost that's expensive. We believe in our analysis it'll save over time because we don't have to go out and clear station platforms, put down salt, ice melt, et cetera. So over time, it'll pay for itself.
Good.
But it will take some time.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Well, streetcar continues to be one of the oh, sorry, Dick, there's redesign.
We're done. You're on.
Oh. Oh, the consultant, streetcar numbers, they continue to be phenomenal. As I said, our average ridership projected for the end of 20-year life into 20 years into the future was numbers that we're hitting, exceeding already. Average ridership was supposed to be 2,700. Our average ridership at 5,800 riders per day. And that's our average. Unfortunately, that's not consistently per se when we say it's average. We know that we have seasonal spikes, we have daily spikes on weekends and so forth. But what's interesting is when you do go back to our projected average ridership, and you'll see in future slides, is that we are exceeding our baseline. I mean, if you take away big events and everything else, we're still exceeding our daily ridership projections. So we do have the core riders that are dependent upon the streetcar for the mobility within the corridor to get from their homes to their workplace to where they want to go. And again, the numbers continue to be phenomenal. We're shocked that the ridership is continuing to grow on average day by day or month by month more than it was previously. We were excited the first year. It was new, it was shiny. Second year, we exceeded the ridership. Third year, we've exceeded the second year ridership. So our ridership continues to grow, and it's become a part of the downtown fabric of our mobility ability through the downtown from Union Station all the way through the Crown Center. And people are using it as their primary rides as they go for various reasons. As we look into, even like I said, if you look at the daily numbers on here, even our lowest numbers, take away Christmas Day in December, a winter month, and our numbers are still exceeding our daily ridership needs. And the spikes are creating issues as to why we're now getting 2 new streetcars that should be coming online before the end of the summer. So appreciate the fact that the revenues that are being collected within the district for the streetcar program, separate from the city's general budget or anything like that, is collecting the revenues that is also paying for the upfront cost of building the system. It's paying for the operations of the system, as well as it has funded the new two new streetcars that will be coming online with revenues that was already either in the bank or will have a short period for payback as a short-term loan to get that. Our timeliness of
Is it a
having a old
gastrointestinal
train
problem?
sound here is beneficial. Trains are now part of what we do is in Public Works, as well as our partnerships with the Kansas City Streetcar Authority as operators and the KCStat as we integrate transit together for integrated system. Again, we look at our month by month, it continues to grow year by year. Like I said, the 2017 numbers exceeded the 2016 numbers if they were in here. And again, you can pretty much see over average, we're picking up more riders each month on average too. So again, that's a phenomenal story. It does create some issues in trying to make sure that we try to run 3 cars per day, at any one time. And when you have what we met the federal requirements, 25% spare, which means 1 car. And if you have any kind of issues with any of the 3 cars out there,
You're
then
in
we
trouble.
run that. On our high occupancy days, that when we start exceeding 12 to 14,000 riders per day, we will deploy all 4 cars. And that will be coming a little bit more frequently when we get those other 2 cars online to give us the spares we need to start running 4-car operations on days that are heavy usage. So that's the good news of where we're going. Winter weather operations for the streetcar. We have had light winters since we started operations in 2016. So this year has been continued to be a learning curve. I think that's the key. We continue to learn and adapt and what we need to do for different events. This winter operations, we've added ice cutters to our OCS lines on top so that during ice events and heavy winter events, we don't have the freezing that we have seen in the past along our OCS lines that has slowed down service. There's been at least a couple of winter events that the streetcars continue to do what we'd estimate for winter operations, which is to run 24 hours a day, not with passengers during those off hours, but there's been some storms where they have run the streetcar overnight continuously to keep those lines freed up so that we can be in service as we want to at 6 a.m. I know there was a couple events that we were still able to run with passengers at 6 a.m. and sorry to say, the bus service had to delay their start operations because of winter operations, and we were able to keep the streetcar going. So we are working with, in combination of the city's regular plowing activities that are going on along the corridor, as well as supplemental service by the Streetcar Authority on how they've been addressing their winter operations. You'll often see on a light snow events the brushy McBrush face, our brush that will run up and down the corridor and kind of brush the snow off of the track lines, as well as their staff out there, as much as Dick has said, getting out there and clearing those platforms so that people can get on and off the streetcar safely. So that's kind of what we've been adjusting for with our winter operations. And like I said, it's continuing to be a learning curve. I think we've gotten better as we've had these multiple storms after storms after storms that we have adjusted and worked with our snowplow operations, as well as the supplemental service that the Streetcar Authority is providing. It's been adaptive because when we go into heavy operations, it's not just Public Works out there plowing the snow along the streetcar, it's also Parks Department, and we thank them for their help and service. So again, it's been a coordination effort with lots of new drivers and lots of new experiences out there this winter. And so I think the big thing, like I said, they've continued to be in operation through much of the winter that as we've adapted, as we've learned. Moving into extension work, as far as additional activities going, I'm going to turn it over to Ralph Davis, who is also helping on the project forefront.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. As we've continued to run, and you see the numbers on the existing line, we're continuing to look at the extensions, and one of them is the north extension, which goes from our 3rd and Grand corner and goes down to the riverfront. And the work's continued. In fact, in January, we conducted a public meeting that was very well attended down in some of the port's new complex down there. They've got a very good community room. It was very well attended. So at this point, it's 30% design is complete. They're almost done with all the environmental work. They're looking at things like bike peg connections and those type of options. And the big thing that they're looking at is how to craft the right financing plan. They'd applied for a bill grant earlier and had not succeeded in that. We were happy to see that the Buck O'Neill did get some money for that. And they're looking to see if they need to apply with the next round of bill grants that's proposed to come out in April, or find another way to fund that. The next slide shows what some of the renderings look like for the expansions, with the bike ped facility on the side as a new separate structure, and very exciting stuff.
Might want to go ahead and add in that slide is that although we're showing, and right now we're working in combination with the bike pedestrian aspects with the Grand Avenue Bridge and connecting up with the riverfront, that the sidewalk and the pedestrian widening aspects needed along that corridor is also needed regardless of the streetcar. So that could also be a standalone project going forward if need be, and is something of interest to the city that we need to provide those accommodations, because as you can see, that bridge is very narrow, and we do have, with the new residents and activities going on up in the riverfront, that there is a need for that bike pedestrian aspect regardless of the streetcar being there or not being there. So sorry to interrupt, Ralph.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's a good point. If we move on to the southern extension, Main Street to the south, again, this is another project that's being done in conjunction with our partners. I didn't add that to the first one, but KCATA, KCMO, and the Streetcar Authority are all working on that one. On the north one, the Port Authority is also a partner in that. The project to the south is, again, another joint effort. At this point, we've been using funding provided by KCATA and KC Streetcar Authority, using some of their operating funds to continue to do the design work. We're moving along. We've got 15% design completed at this point. Getting ready to do that. We're currently in the environmental evaluation stage, and we hope to soon hear back from the state historic preservation. And once they do that, we'll be able to go into the final stage of the environmental, which is going out for final public comment. There was a public meeting we had a couple weeks ago, very, very well attended, and there was about 140 or 145 people that showed up for that on a Thursday night, and a lot of energy, a lot of main comment is, when's it coming? When are you going to bring it? We didn't hear a lot of opposition, but mainly answer our questions and when can you make this happen? And as we keep on going with that, what part of what we have done is we did send the project in to get rated by the federal government last fall. So they take a look. They're currently taking a look at how it rates on all their scales. We expect to hear back this month on that. With the annual budget comes out about a week after that, they give out the ratings on the project. So we're looking forward to that number, and that will give us indication how we stand inside their system as far as hopefully being eligible for future funding. You're seeing another picture of the rendering. This is streetcar looking north from the Union Hill area back towards Union Station, and with the Liberty Memorial off to the left, and just more of those projects. Let's see, is that all the slides on that one? It is. All right.
New start application.
Oh, we did put in a New Start app. It's called a New Start application with the federal government. We have requested $150 million through that process. that will also match the money coming from the TDD that was authorized in that area. And we're looking to see how the feds respond to that application. If the project rates well, we feel we'll have an opportunity. But of course, we're also waiting for the feds to make up their minds and make decisions and authorize money, which
How much time do you want to wait?
I don't want to wait any, but I have the feeling we're going to have some patience with that organization.
And what's Plan B?
Continue to look at options. We'll continue the design. We'll continue to develop the work. There's a multi-year process to get everything prepared for that, so we can keep on driving ahead, getting that developed as we apply. So we've applied early enough in the process. We applied to do what's called project development, which is the current phase. If we stay on track by the end of the year, we should be authorized to enter into full engineering, which is what we anticipate. And we'd like to get indications from the feds before then, but if not, we can keep on proceeding and keep on requesting and see how it progresses. There's good signs from Congress that they keep on funding the program and the capital improvement grant program regularly. So with that support, we think that we will eventually be successful. It's just a matter of working through the process. It's a very bureaucratic process and a political process.
To say the least. I was in D.C. in January at U.S. conference meetings, and Mayor Holt from Oklahoma City, new mayor there, was there telling me about their streetcar project and how they were about to finish their honeymoon period and how people were, I don't want to say complaining, but certainly making it known to them that why can't we do what Kansas City is doing and keep it free? So the word is apparently spread that we have a great system here. It's not the first time I've heard people from other cities talking about our streetcar system. So that's a good thing. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Keep it up. And the collaboration with KCATA, I think, is a very good thing to do. The integration of all of our systems, I think, is absolutely vital.
Yeah, they've got so much knowledge from doing like Prospect Max and so many things that
Sure.
is so immensely helpful, and just their experience with transit. So it brings the strength of all of our entities together at the same time to actually make even a better project.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, that brings us to the end of strategy B around transit. But next strategy up, C, is around sidewalk investment. And so we'll turn it back to Public Works to talk about that.
Well, sidewalks are extremely important for connectivity and mobility as well. So, as you know, we didn't have a strong funding source for sidewalks until the GEO bonds were approved. We're very thankful for the funding opportunities that's bringing. We have been focusing on addressing the sidewalk 311 call-ins for out-of-repair sidewalk prior to the passing of the GEO bond. We are still working through them. We did modify it from a isolated spot repair, as many people don't recall, that when we used to get 311 calls in at an address that said it was out of repair, and if we inspected it and it was out of repair, we sort of went out with blinders because we didn't want to create large assessments on everybody along a block. So with the change of the GEO bond, where it is no longer assessed back to the property owner, we took off our blinders and have looked at the whole block that the calls were on and have been focusing on addressing the issues. So now what we're saying is we're looking to make it address the mobility issues from a whole block face. If you entered a sidewalk on one end of the street, then you're going to be able to get on that sidewalk. If we've been able out there to repair it, that you can get to the other end and get off of it, so that the curb ramps are appropriate on each end, as well as there are not any obstructions that keep you from being the mobility abatement. So we're looking at more of now as a block face. And our program is still addressing what we're saying is spot repairs. In essence, we're not coming out there and replacing 100% of the block that needs to be fixed. So we've taken any block that doesn't have, less than 75% of the sidewalk squares needs to be replaced. We've been doing that as part of our current sidewalk repair progress. And what we've been working on is still catching up with those call-ins to address it. So year one, we had our first year contract, but we addressed the number of block face that was from the river basically south. And the reason down to 85th Street, the reason we didn't do up north and south of 85th Street on that first year contract was because the previous year we had already did spot repair north of the river as well as south of 85th Street. So second year we went back, we looked at the entire city as far as still addressing those 311 call-ins prior to January 1 of 2017, excuse me. So we've continued to work on those. We're working through. We still have several of those backlogs that we're still addressing and doing the block repairs. The ones that had identified that they needed to be fully replaced, we have also worked with PIAC, and PIAC is continuing to fund sidewalk repairs along the block, and we appreciate that. The advantage, like I said, very much so now is we are doing this without assessments back to an individual property owner for repairs in front of their house. So that's what we're working on. We are keeping track of our progress of what we have been doing. So we have an interactive map that people can go to that is on the website as it identifies. It's kcmo.gov is always our starting spot for websites with the city. Then it's /sidewalks. And so you can see some of the spot repairs where we have fixed the block faces along those the blue marked lines, and then the red line ones are what are currently the second year bond projects, and then if there's a whole kind of neighborhood that we've been working on is also shown. So the easiest way to check on it is go to the website.
Word of caution, because if you look at this, and I'll just go based on my experience with various parts of the city, if north of the river doesn't look like they've had anything, they will complain without knowing that they were addressed the year before. Somehow or another, that needs to be noted.
Okay.
Otherwise, they're going to think that somehow they're being shorted, and that's not true, but this chart does not show the reality. Okay. So that needs to be noted somewhere.
We will note the ones, especially because we did go back and not even throughout the whole city, the sidewalk assessments that were still outstanding when we passed the GO bonds as part of a separate funding source. The city had the funds, and we removed all the past assessments.
Right.
So those previously assessed projects, when we had still outstanding assessments, those were also forgiven. So
okay,
we'll need to note that. So
I can speak to this next one, which is we decided to start digging into an analysis that we will for sure come back to, but looking at the relationship between resident satisfaction in the areas where we've done sidewalk repairs. And this is partially because low resident satisfaction was one of the reasons that sidewalk repair was even kind of on the table during the GO bond discussion. So started off just doing kind of a buffer analysis, basically, to look at satisfaction, with sidewalks in your neighborhood within a quarter mile of a sidewalk repair in year one and outside of that area. And I would say that one of the big takeaways, which sounds really obvious but is important to note, is that satisfaction was a lot lower in the areas where we did had targeted these sidewalk backlog repairs, which sounds, like I said, it sounds evident, but it kind of shows to us that not only were these areas where sidewalks were definitely out of repair because people had called them in, but that satisfaction really was lower there. And so two good reasons to concentrate initial efforts there. So far, we did see that dissatisfaction has gone down slightly in the areas within a quarter mile. But for residents not near the repairs, dissatisfaction went up. So this is sort of a function of, if you are not seeing it right outside your window. But the big note on this is that we have not really accrued that many surveys since we started doing these repairs, really less than a year. So it's a very small sample size and something we'll continue to track and hopefully, see the impact of those repairs.
our baseline for repairs and their needs continue to balance that the need is still great. And we'll just say it, the need is still great to continue to work on our sidewalk repairs. We are appreciative of the continued funding through the different districts that are funding full sidewalk replacements with their PIAC dollars to supplement and accelerate our GeoBond sidewalk repair programs. So that's been was going on prior to the GeoBonds, but those still did result in assessments on those prior PIAC projects. So now, again, the PIAC combined with the GEO bond, there is no assessments going out for sidewalk repairs where we are able to get to them. As maybe noted by the satisfaction survey, we still have plenty of sidewalks to continue to work on. And once we start working and completing the backlog repairs, which I think we're hoping will be close to being caught up with at least the spot repair program of the backlog, not the full block repairs, we will be then transitioning into information that we're collecting through an RFP that we put out to do some pilot work. We've identified some zones in the city that we're looking at starting our sidewalk inspection as part of the GEO bond program. We also committed that we would inspect all of the city sidewalks and the corridors within once every 10 years. So over the GEO bond 20-year lifespan, we will be inspecting every sidewalk location, regardless of whether sidewalks exist or not. We will be inspecting every street for sidewalks within our city twice over the life of the GEO bond. So in doing so, we're looking at ways we can utilize better technology ideas of getting better details using drive-by LiDAR details of the sidewalk conditions. And not just what the condition is, but to the point it gives us detailed plans and what the repair needs are. And we're looking at opportunities that we can expend, that we can address how we fix sidewalks and make them walkable without always having to do remove and replace as our only option, as well as how do we effectively inspect all these locations over the whole city. As we say, we've got over 2,300 center line miles, so if you look at each one on each side of the street, that's double the block faces, so that's quite a bit of inspection that needs to be taken on. So we're looking forward to the 3 different firms that we're looking at inspecting in pilot areas, and so we're looking to see how we can be efficiently. And then as we gather that data from the inspection, we will also be looking at how does that balance out what needs are based on the identified prioritization process the city had already went to be a technically based requirement of higher priority sidewalks and others that address the connectivity to schools and healthcare, transit, other aspects of quality of life issues for our community, and the need for sidewalks in some streets being maybe identified as a higher need than others, although they're all needed. So with that, we're continuing to work the program. We look forward to the continuing years with the GEO bond funding and the opportunity to continue to improve our sidewalk connectivity throughout the city. Curb ramps are still an important part of what we're doing. We're not only doing it for, like I said, the block face. If you get on a block face, you can get off on the other end. It's a big concern. You see ADA folks and different mobility devices going down the street because in the past, if we hadn't been out there to fix something, if you were able to get onto a sidewalk, you didn't know that you could actually get to the other end without running into out-of-repair sidewalks or a curb ramp at the other end that didn't exist. So we're continuing to work on the curb repair placements. Part of our GEO bond sidewalk funds are directly addressing the curb ramp issues, and so we're knocking off about 250 side curb ramps per year, and we're looking for in this coming fiscal year to try to up that to about 400 throughout the community and try to get us done and completed with our barrier curb ramps being removed within under 3 or 4 years.
Okay, if there aren't any questions about the strategy C on sidewalks, we'll move on to strategy D, last one under this objective, and this is focused on updating and implementing the Bike Casey Trails Plan. I'll turn it over to Joe Blankenship, City Planning.
Thanks, Kate. Mr. Mayor, Joe Blankenship, City Planning and Development. This is an exciting time to be giving you an update on the Bike KC Master Plan. We are entering the adoption process. We're actually halfway through, as you'll see. You've seen this vision statement before. This is the vision for the Bike KC Master Plan that will guide staff's ability to make Kansas City a bike-friendly community moving forward. Next slide. So this project's been a 2-year work in progress. We began this project in earnest in early 2017 with background and public outreach. We've moved into, completing 14 public meetings at this point throughout this project. We attended special events throughout the city to gain community feedback, including Celebration at the Station, the 2017 Jazz Fest. We got over 1,500 people to respond to a survey, both an online and in-person survey. We've given monthly updates to our Bike Ped Advisory Committee and regular updates to the T&I Committee. We have had this project available for public consumption via a regular, city communication channels, KC Momentum, Facebook Live events, project-specific website, and all the content of the plan was anchored by a steering and technical committee that met regularly with us throughout the course of the project. Some of the plan highlights, and again, the plan is fully available on the project website. Some of the plan highlights include a 5-year implementation approach, talking about cost estimates and various build-out scenarios for this network, oversight and responsibility of the plan, and that's anchored by a collaborative core work team that we suggest formulating, and 2 program coordinators, one that oversees infrastructure implementation and one that oversees day-to-day planning and other programmatic element implementation. We also discuss funding strategies that might be available to implement the plan and other policies and programs that will be needed to make Kansas City a bike-friendly community. And finally, our last chapter in the Bike KC Master Plan talks about establishing metrics to measure our progress and growth as a bike-friendly community. So what does the Bike KC network look like when it's fully built out? 658 miles of streets. We recommend 3 basic broad facility type categories. Major separation, which is basically a vertical barrier between moving cyclists and automobile traffic. Minor separation, which is any painted element on the street that provides a dedicated space for bikes. 20th Street in the crossroads in that picture provides an example of a buffered bike lane, which is an example of a minor separated facility. And then we also identify shared streets throughout the city, which are, calm residential streets that don't need dedicated space for cyclists. To help aid in staff and public understanding of what these facilities could look like, the Bike KC Master Plan provides a facility glossary. It's a visual explanation of what various bike facilities can be constructed as. And as I mentioned before, funding strategies to build out this full Bike KC Master Plan are identified in the plan. The full estimated cost of this project would be somewhere between $387 and $418 million, and that's an incremental build out over time. It's important to note that some of the streets identified on this plan don't even exist. So streets in the Northland or out east in Little Blue Valley are examples of areas where streets are on the major street plan. We identified on the Bike KC plan for inclusion, but they're not constructed right now. So to help sort of condense this into a more manageable project, we anchored this with a 5-year implementation approach. So every 5 years, we want to reevaluate and update Bike KC network implementation goals. Over the first 5 years, we want to focus on about 135 miles of projects to focus on. Again, we provide planning level cost estimates, and we believe that over time, as we get more efficient, and familiar with various types of bikeway construction, we'll see cost savings in addition to cost savings from incorporating into programs like our annual resurfacing program or other large capital projects that are happening throughout the city. The first phase of projects that we want to focus on are about 61 miles of phase 1 projects, and those are projects that are already studied or currently underway. So examples of those include Lexington Gladstone in the Northeast, Charlotte Holmes, Martin Luther King Boulevard. Those are projects that we already have work underway on. Let's finish what we've started. If we complete those, we want to move into phase 2, and those are kind of connecting the dots between existing infrastructure. So where the gaps exist, fill those gaps. And then if we continue to move forward and get to phase 3, it's relatively small in comparison. It's about 8 miles of upgrading infrastructure that might not be the highest level of comfort right now. An example of that would be Southwest Boulevard in the Crossroads, where we would want to see it identified as a major separated facility instead of the minor separated facility that it is right now. One of the important things that we've included in the plan are maintenance and operations considerations. As these projects are developed, we want to understand how we are going to maintain what we've built and make it a usable and safe environment. So, as I've said, we're in the adoption process. Last night, Bike Ped Advisory Committee unanimously approved the Bike KC Master Plan draft. Last week, the KC Parks Board did the same thing. Our next meeting is March 19th, and that's our City Plan Commission meeting. And then we're aiming for early April for Council Committee to consider this document.
Okay, good.
Any questions on that before I move on to the shared active transportation slide?
No.
Okay, great. So the one last slide I have here talks about shared active transportation in Kansas City, and this is our dockless bikes and scooter program that we're launching. Right now we have 3 active interim operating agreements: Bird, Spen, which has not launched their fleet, and then the Ride KC bikes that are the electric bikes that Bike Walk KC and the KCTA partnered with. We issued an RFP for a pilot program to begin, and we issued that RFP in December. We received numerous responses, and we're actually meeting this coming tomorrow as staff to discuss the responses that we received. We tentatively hope to launch the year-long pilot program at the early part of April. Any questions on that?
No, not really. You know, what the back on the implementation program.
Yeah.
The total time for implementation, what, 15 years?
Total time for implementation of the Bike KC Master Plan?
Yeah.
It's a little bit undetermined because, as I mentioned, a lot of the streets that exist on this plan are either
Don't exist?
Don't exist. So as the city develops, this plan will grow with the city. So that's why we wanted to take the 5-year approach to really focus in on what we're trying to accomplish each 5-year period.
So let me ask you this. What's been accomplished in the last 5 years?
In the last 5 years, we've seen great progress as a city. We have our first parking protected bike lane. We have a number of buffered bike lanes throughout the city that didn't exist beforehand. We're getting better at incorporating bike facilities into our resurfacing program. So we're making progress, and we
Okay.
want to build on that progress.
Good. So level of satisfaction amongst bike riders going up?
It did go up last year, the resident satisfaction after the last quarter, I think, which went out right after the grand bike lanes opened.
Okay. Great, thanks, appreciate it.
Okay, so that takes us to, we switched around a little bit, Objective 3, which is engage in efforts to strategically invest in the city's infrastructure. And we've got our strategic infrastructure objective metrics up front. There are 3 or 4 strategies, under 4 strategies, I believe, under this. And the first one, Strategy A, is the longest. It is about infrastructure asset management. So it covers a number of different asset areas, which we will walk through. So turn it over to Public Works to start talking about their asset management efforts.
Well, roadways, bridges, pavement, signs, traffic signals, streetlights. Lots of activities that we're working on. I think the one that most people see and are hearing about the most right now, of course, is the roadway with the pavement. And our pavement index ratings continue to decline. We rate these pavements in very detailed level every 3 years with a subjective testing and drive-by of our streets with technical evaluations of what it looks like, and that's looking at our pavements from the top down. And so the ratings are based on a national rating system of condition scoring. And you can see that our pavements that are rated in good to satisfactory condition are 22%. The category that goes from poor to failed is our 70% ratings. And our fair is in the middle. So our pavements are in poor condition. As you can see, that's what's happened over this winter. I think it's very reflective of the fact that we do have too many pavements that are in poor condition. This is based on continued years of disinvestment in our pavements that doesn't meet the ideal standard for what we would like to do. We are moving different directive with the GEO bond program. I will say that our goal in the GEO bond project list would be ideally to make sure that we look at continued pavement replacement. We have roadway bases that have been there for as long as anybody could ever remember, so we know some of our bases out there for our pavement is well over 50 to 100 years old, just like some of our structures and other aspects are. We continue to put pavement surface over the top of them. We continue to crack seal them. We continue to seal them up, and moisture is one of our biggest assets that happens that deteriorates our pavements as much as anything. The continued freeze-thaw cycles is the worst enemy for our pavements. We have seen continuous freeze-thaws with a lot of moisture on our pavements this season, and it is very reflective on our poor conditions that we have. It's the cause of a lot of the potholes, or all of the potholes. Even the days that the temperature has not gotten above freezing, the pavement temperatures have, based on the sun and other conditions that have gone on out there. So, again, our pavements are not in our best shape. We're looking to just determine, because we have so many roadways, we do know that our charts show that there is a critical point where the pavements can deteriorate not in a linear fashion, but in an exponential fashion. So we are looking at ways to prioritize our investment to not only look into when the pavement condition is at a certain range, do we resurface it, but we're now looking to add other data points to help us decide between one pavement surface being redone as another one, adding traffic volume, pothole requests, and the number of potholes. That's going to be an additional data that is going to help us determine which ones we're going to make our investments on resurfacing and improvements of our assets, as well as other factors such as accidents and so forth. So looking to make sure that we're making the best decisions on what we are, on how we spend our pavement rehabilitation funds, to do what we typically do is a 2-inch mill and overlay, and reserve some of that money for other activities such as pavement rejuvenation that expands the life of some of the newer pavements to block the moisture out and get a lot longer life on it. So sometimes people look and say, well, you just resurfaced my road 2 or 3 years ago. Now you're back doing those same people's road again. We're not resurfacing them. We're adding our pavement surface rejuvenation to make sure that we're sealing it up. So we're trying to do the best balance. We are thankful that in this proposed upcoming budget that we are going from a rough estimate of $10 million a year to $16 million plus to address our pavement issues. And so we'll be talking about that further as we talk about our further budget implications. We have put out our current projects. We're out to bid. The bids were opened last week. We do not have on these bid openings. We did take a new approach this year. We did not list out all of the streets that we are planning on doing, because we are going to continue to monitor and adjust what we need. We work on our resurfacing program not only on the criteria we talked about, but we also do try to coordinate with our public utilities, water services being one of them, and they're working on an extensive water main replacement program. So we're working on making sure we're not resurfacing streets prior to their coming in, and a year or two later tearing up the streets. And we also do work with, believe it or not, Aspire, and which is our gas company ownership, and what their capital projects are. Not all of us working on a fantastic 5-year budget that each year we do have to make adjustments based on unknown things that come up, such as not only do with the potholes, but water main breaks, gas main breaks, and so forth. So that adjusts their plans, as well as the other utilities for telecommunications that are often out in our roadways, cutting them up after we resurface them and work on them. So we do try to coordinate with that. The other aspects, like I said, we do spend part of our budget on microsurfacing and crack sealing. And like I said, we just completed our street condition rating from 2018, and that data is being collected, and it's also how we're going to continue to make best decisions as that data is being better analyzed for us to decide what streets to resurface this coming fiscal year and this summer. Potholes,
Sure.
they exist.
Yeah.
And we are working hard on trying to get them removed. The number has been is hugely up this year compared to the past few years where we've had more of a milder winter. said moisture on the pavement, as well as going through numerous freeze thaws on a daily basis, is the enemy of our pavements and helps to create a lot of our potholes. Again, we have another map that we're showing and tracking where our potholes are throughout the city and where the requests are coming in. And it is reflective of some of our oldest pavements and our oldest base, but it is throughout the entire city. We do have some corridors that are major. We do focus on when we do our pothole replacement, we do focus on our higher traffic volume roadways first, especially understanding that if you're on a major arterial and you're in a lane of traffic and you have cars next to you, so you have limited opportunities and decisions on where you can go for your drive to try to avoid those potholes. So swerving in and out of your lane is not an option when you have cars next to you. We understand that. We did try new technology this year, new product. It is not a full repair of a pothole. It is a technique that allows us to put a product down in an interim to try to keep it from basically eating your tires and eating your front ends. They're called thump pads. So they're a temporary repair to just bridge the gap that you're not falling as deep into the hole in the deep potholes, and putting those out knowing that they're there, but we can't always get to them to the pothole repair fast enough. So we are working with different staff who's not repairing potholes to have these products to be able to try to throw down into holes as we see them with other aspects. So it is a fun name, but the product name literally is thump pads. So again, we're continuing to try to strive for innovation and new products and new ideas and how to address the problems within our roadways, and this is one of the things we're trying to address this year. So if you see something temporarily down there, it is, like I said, it's a temporary measure. It is not, we know it's not a full repair to the pothole, but it is trying to just help you bridge your ability to drive over it.
Mr. Mayor, in addition to the roads, we're also focusing on our bridges. Bridges are another one of our key assets that, it's essential. If the bridge, if we start having problems with our bridges, it breaks the links between our roadway segments. So one of our goals is to at least keep our bridges at the target of good or better, 80% of them good or better, which is our sufficiency rating of 65, which means that they'll function for our people. And we've done a pretty good job. They've been maintained at that level. And we're very grateful for that. We don't want to go any below that, because at that point you start going below it, we start closing structures and start having more issues. As we look at the list we have, we've got a number of bridges through the GEO bond program that have been funded for construction. If I can get Kate to, there we go. And these are projects that are I think we've skipped this slide.
No, it's the other way.
It's the other way? I got it
Design.
backwards. All right, never mind. So, these are projects that we're currently designing. So, it's a three-part process: design, and then construct it before we can open it back up. So, Round Grove Creek, which is over by the stadium, Pleasant Valley Road up north, Northeast 112th up north, Pittman Road, which is over in the 3rd District, North Main over Small Creek is up by the water plant. Hillcrest is down by the by Swope Park, and then Beardsley Road, which is a road we've struggled with. That's the one that caught on fire, if you remember, where the homeless camp caught.
Yeah.
And we've got getting ready to put that one back out to. The design's almost done. Get ready to put it out to bid. That's going to be an expensive repair because they decided to light tires on fire. So. That's an ongoing struggle we're going to have with those. If we move on to the next slide, we do have some of them funded for construction. Kenneth Road, which is way down south. 155th Street, which is actually an agreement we made with Raymore because it's on the city limit line. That was actually a wooden bridge before we replaced it, believe it or not. We still had some really old stuff in town. And then Northeast 104th Street is being done in conjunction with TIF. And we are also looking at, in the future years, we have some more of them that are being planned out. And the biggest thing with all this is we're trying to keep a continuous flow of funds going for the bridges. So we get some designed. We have some set up for construction. If we continue to replace a few of these and rehabilitate a few of these every other year, we can keep the system actually functioning. If at some point we stop doing this, watch out, because it takes about 3 to 4 years to actually get a bridge fixed, because of the details, because of all the structural details, because of all the work it takes to make it happen. So the ones into the future are as important as the ones that we've currently got designed and ready to go. And I'd love to answer any bridge questions that you may have.
I don't have any. But thanks for offering.
Streetlights is another condition asset. We have over $95,000 to $100,000 or thousand fixtures and streetlights within our city limits. So this is a big task, but we do have a contract that maintains these at a very high standard, where we try to make sure that our streetlights are in good overall condition, as well as having a response to repair the streetlights, any issues associated with a non-functioning streetlight within ideally about 48 hours or so, if we can, unless the wires have been stolen or there's extensive numbers of issues associated with a knockdown or so forth. I think some of our biggest issues for streetlight conditions in a lot of our neighborhoods is where we have private streetlights, where aren't following standards, and the neighborhood associations and stuff are supposed to be taking care of them, and sometimes they don't have the resources to ideally fix them. But we do maintain the ones. We do know there are neighborhoods that do not have streetlights that we're part of. When we upgraded our system, we bought it from KCP&L, and so streetlight systems that were outside of the KCP&L system at that time were not bought in, and so we do have some areas that are dark in our city that have issues. But moving forward, ideally we'd like to have a system that is moving towards an LED lighting system. We currently do not have that, except in newer neighborhoods or new design projects that the city is implementing. We do spec ourselves to have LED lights. We did find some carryover contract money that we've had in our budgets that has not been used for specialty lighting, for specialty contract stuff. So we have implemented a new pilot program this spring, basically, where we try, with our contract for maintenance, we re-lamp, basically change the light bulb, every 4 years with our current lighting systems out on our streets. So we've worked with our contractor with a small funding of approximately about $1 million and asked for a price quote to said, instead of changing the light bulb, what if you change the whole fixture, and instead of putting up old technology, what if you converted them over to LED? So we are now working on a process as a pilot program that we're going to be converting about 4,000 high-pressure sodium vapor lights to LED lights, which is much more efficient, costs us a lot less in electricity, and also should have a longer lifespan for those bulbs, so we'll have reduced maintenance costs on these facilities as well. So we were able to identify some areas that were programmed for relamping this spring, which is shown on the map in the blue. It is some of the first ring suburbs of our city that were left over for this spring on the repair plan, and we are getting them converted for about $1 million. We're converting over 4,000 fixtures to LED standard. And so this, like I said, it's a pilot program. We don't have funds moving forward into the future to continue this program, but was just an example of what it would take. We've investigated converting our entire system over to LED in the past, and the price tag just comes in so high that we just not being able to move forward on it. So we're pretty excited about this new program. Should be up and running by the 2019 and help us reduce and stabilize our electricity costs as well as our maintenance costs on our streetlight system.
Now, Sherry, I remember meeting with the manager and Representative Phillips, I don't know how long ago, maybe a year ago, and I thought that there was going to be some work done on the east side with conversion to LED. That hasn't happened, or is...
No, we've never had any full funding to follow through and do that.
Okay.
So, they said the locations where this just happened to be, because we just caught the program and what was still being planned for relamping through the end of this fiscal year. So we now have a sample of what the costs are through a smaller program that we can take it off in chunks instead of whole big pieces. But the stuff with Phillips on the east side was the funding was never identified to completely do that activity. If it was probably for 100 lamps and 100 lights, not anything significant for numbers.
Okay.
So we're looking into, like I said, the money we're spending does not include what is already being estimated at $170,000 payback per year as far as the investments just on the energy savings and maintenance savings on these 4,000 lights. So we feel like it's a good return on investment for a sample. So we're looking at different opportunities and looking for ways to optimize our systems. Try some new innovation.
All right.
Next up under this strategy is water services, which is who's going to speak about their 3 asset categories.
Thank you, Kate. Terry Lee, KC Water. So our first 2 slides are our water main replacement program. We have developed heat maps that we've been using for 7 years now that identify a system of categories that fall under consequence of failure and likelihood of failure. So each year we update the analysis, and then for that year we start the planning process to replace those in the red area, which are the highest priority on that system. So the first 2 slides show north of the river and south of the river.
Terry, one question about that, just because do have the number of miles. So you don't adjust, I'm guessing, since the A group, the red, is getting smaller, you don't recalibrate the categories as you go. I mean, because you're having less things fall into more likely failure. Does that make sense?
Well, we redo the analysis every year. So every year you're going to have additional pipes that are going to fall into that red category.
Okay, right.
Ideally, over time, you'll see less total number of miles. So for this year, the total red is only 1.64 miles, and the orange is 16.09 miles. And then your largest group is C, which is 106. So we plan to do 28 miles a year, which is shown on the next slide. That's the north, so yes. So that's just the same heat map showing south of the river. So on the next slide, we show our breaks over time. The blue line represents a number of breaks per year. So back in FY14, we had 1,375 breaks, and you can see how that's come down and kind of plateaued at the moment. Parallel with that, on the same slide, we have the miles replaced each year. We've ramped up, and we were doing about 28 miles a year over the last 5 years. You'll notice this year 2 things. One, the number of breaks is up. We had a very dry year in 2018 with our clay soils. The movement of the soils finds a lot of the bad places in the pipes, and we have an increased number of breaks. And also, the number of miles that we put in the ground over the current year is projected to be lower than normal. 2 things there. One is the resources on our side to deliver the projects. We had some transfer, some people around, and 2, the time to take to contract increase this year, also due to personnel staffing issues. But we think we've rectified both of those, and we should be back on track next year with 28 miles of pipe.
I guess I'm confused because maybe I just don't know how to read this chart, but it looks like the blue vertical lines are miles replaced in the teal, and then the blue line are main breaks. Are you telling me that you did 723 miles in fiscal 18 and there were 28 breaks?
Vice versa. 28.
Okay, you did 30 miles. Okay, I got you.
Right.
And there were 723. Gotcha. All right. I got it backwards. Thanks.
The next slide shows the water main breaks over time. If we look at it to compare us or benchmark us to other utilities or to a standard, the optimum level of breaks per mile would be 15. As you see in the blue line, we started out at around 50 in FY14, and we've gotten that down into the 20s. This year will be up a little higher because of the drought years, as I explained on the previous slide. So ideally, the blue line will continue to go down and approach the red line over next, I would guess 10, 15 years. Next slide is our standard slide that we use to talk about our valve exercising program. So back in 2011, we began a proactive valve exercising program. So the initial operability in the top two slides was 53% for the first time around. And when that exercising was complete, 84% of those valves were operable.
You think you'd be any better off if you hired Hans and Franz as consultants, because they will pump you up?
I don't know. We do an outside contractor, but
Worth
we
a
don't
shot.
call them Hans and Franz. So
Worth a shot. Not many Saturday Night Live people are here.
the bottom two circles represent the second go around for us, and as you can see, the initial operability is at 79%, so that's up from 53%. And then when we're completed with those rounds, we're at 89%. So ideally, we like to get that up where the operability is around 95%. We still have a lot of valves that need to be replaced in the system that are broken open. That's valve exercising. This is a good news slide for us. Post 1993 flood, the Corps of Engineers with the local partners started developing a program to evaluate and rehabilitate all the levees in the Kansas City area. And so that's what we call the KCStat Levees Project. Normally there's a 65% federal match, 35% local. With recent legislation, the KC Levees construction is going to be 100% funded by the federal government, which is great news. It'll save us around $30 million. It'll save the UG on the Kansas side about $90 million.
And how long is it going to take to do it?
So ideally, the Corps is forecasting 3 to 5 years. They are employing design build procurement delivery, which is not a common thing for them to do on the levee side. So I think there's going to be a little learning curve. But the goal they have for all their projects is to complete them in 3 years. So this will be about a total $450 million worth of construction over that period of time, which will, I think, have some impacts on our construction workforce availability in the region. And then our last slide is a project that we're very excited about out at the Blue River Wastewater Treatment Plant. It will use advanced digestion, thermal hydrolysis to treat our solids from our wastewater treatment plant operations in lieu of incineration. And so we're looking forward to getting out of the incineration and that emissions that go along with that. It will also provide opportunities to recover resources from our solids. The product that will be produced will be what they call a Class A, which means it can be used in any purpose for soil amendment, gardens, flowers. It has no restrictions on its use. It will also provide opportunity for energy recovery and then phosphorus recovery. So this is a design build project. We hope to go out on the street late this summer for design build contractor. We also have new funding sources that we're using for the first time. The EPA WIFIA program, which is a national funding program that we applied for and were successful in getting chosen for that. And then we'll also be pairing that with state revolving loan fund for the first time in a long time. So that'll cut down our borrowing costs. Looks to be about a $100 million project. One of the outcomes also will be advancement in technology, is that we'll be able to use a called BIM module, which is basically a 3D module of all of our facilities at Blue River involved in the solids process. And that wraps up my slides.
And I think, Terry, last time you talked about the biosolids processing project, I think you were still at the tail end of the decision-making process. So from what you said, made the decision to move forward with it and actually go through the contracting this summer. And did you say what the estimated time frame for completion is?
Probably 18 to 24 months. We'll probably decide that based upon the pricing that we might get. If we overly constrain them with too fast of a schedule, the price goes up. So we haven't finished that planning process yet.
Great. All right. That is all of the asset categories that are kind of pushed together there in Strategy A. We actually have a new Strategy E focused on our park and trail assets, and Parks and Rec is going to talk about this new strategy.
Thank you, Kate. Terry, I just want to make sure I understand. So the smell is no longer going to be there. How will we know when we're getting close to the river?
I guess that depends on which direction you're coming from, but
All right. Okay.
it should greatly reduce our.
Let me get back in my lane. In 2017, we did a thorough park assessment of all of our amenities in our parks. And at that time, we found that only 33% were rated good, 40% poor, and 14% fair. The other 13% are undeveloped. What that determined is that we had about a $36.6 million backlog in our deferred maintenance. So additionally, we are doing, working with Meg and Eric on the ADA assessments and transition plan, and that is estimated to cost over $13 million. So both of those are unfunded, that $66.6 million, and we decided we better figure out how to prioritize our improvements and how to work on our collecting our information and managing our assets. We're working now. Actually, we're in a 3-day training this week to switch over to Cartograph as our maintenance and asset management system. Currently, we use the same worksheets that we used when I started in 1981, so they're a bit antiquated. So we know that will be the physical attributes of the parks. We're working with the Urban Land Institute on trying to determine how to assess priorities on more than just physical need, because we have so many things that are in poor condition. We're looking at user satisfaction, current and future use, the quality of the experience, which I have a really good statistic on. We did our in-house survey, went out to all the people on our email blast. 600 surveys came back in. 90% of the people agreed that Parks and Recreation has a positive impact on the quality of life. So pretty proud of that and happy to hear that. We also know that we need to be inclusive, both in social equity and accessibility. So all that to say, we're going to look at the condition of the parks, the needs in terms of ADA, and consider many different pieces to set up our priorities going forward.
Mr. Mayor, Richard Allen, and then on this strategy, as we're building more trails, it's important that people know how to find where these trails are. And when they're out on the trails, how do they know where they're at? And then the third thing is, how do we make them safer? And so one of the strategies for getting the word out on where these trails are at, we're working with our Missouri Parks and Recreation Association, and they're working with cities throughout Missouri on mapping the trails in the different cities. I think we need to get our trail maps out onto the kcmo.org website. We need to get them out onto KC Parks website as well. And then as we continue to build the trails, all the city departments work really well together. City manager's office, public works, water department, parks, and developing a uniform trail signage. And we've worked with Mark, Mid-America Regional Council, on a uniform emergency 911 signage. And kind of happy to report that we've worked with Jackson County, Platte County, Gladstone, Riverside, Parkville, on incorporating the standard 911 signage throughout the system. And then also we're incorporating a mile marker system in cooperation with the 911, and so that can be used as a maintenance tool as well. So if people are out on the trail and they're at mile marker 3.2 on Line Creek Trail, they can say there's a limb down, and then they can contact our 311, let them know that there's improvements need to be made on the trail. The final strategy is how do we evaluate, how our first responders are responding to incidents along the trail. And so we have worked with Mark. We have a GPS signage system that if somebody's out on the trail, we GPS these locations. We give them to the 911 operators. If somebody calls in, they can say we're at mile marker 3.1. They could say the address on these signage, and then the 911 operator is able to send out the first responders to that location. So we have a lot of new trails. We've incorporated the 911 system out on the Line Creek Trail, which is one of the most popular trails in the Northland, and then also along Indian Creek Trail and Blue River Trail out south. And then also we're looking at ways to work with the state of Kansas on the Indian Creek Trail on developing more uniform trail signage on that. So that's an update on those.
Good.
Okay, strategy B, implement a plan to expand the public art program to a broader category of assets. Eric Bosch is going to speak to that.
Hi, Eric.
Assistant City Manager Ernest Rouse, Eric Bosch, City Architect. The title of this is Expanding the Public Art Program, and that's my series of slides will address that in many ways. The issuance of the GEO bonds and passing of the GEO bonds let us expand the art program, and our first 2 years of that, I've listed some of the projects here we've already started working on, assembling the committees and getting ready to commission artists. The second slide talks about some of the projects that this moves us into another area of art projects. Some of these projects listed here are funding that's not city funding. It's private money being raised. Law Enforcement Memorial is one of those.
Mm-hmm.
The Workers Memorial is another one. And there's some public-private partnerships. One of the ones that I'll lead into my next slide with is the Kansas City Convention Center Hotel. Working with the Lowe's Hotel Corporation, we're going to work with them on all their art in the hotel and possibly incorporate our 1% for art process. So as we're selecting artists and commissioning artists, some of the funding that they might put aside for art that they were going to have in their hotel anyway, we might participate in that on selecting the artist. Our next slide talks a little bit about how other cities are approaching expanding their art program. And the hotel is one example of this, but we have several office buildings, apartment buildings that the city is constructing and not really particularly involved in, except maybe we're allowing tax incentives or participating with infrastructure around these developments. And other cities have been very successful in having the developer required to provide a percentage of art as part of their budget for the whole project. So there were some discussions, early discussions were taking place with some developers, not really mandating any of this, but maybe seeing if they'll volunteer. And I think a good start would be some of the new office building that we're building downtown, the hotels that we're building, some of the apartments. Our project is, our art program is very successful as it is just using 1% of buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that other cities are also doing is to try to develop the program and have a fund set aside that we can use for multiple things. One specifically is to maintain our art. Recently we did a complete inventory of all the art in the city that's part of the 1% for Art program, and we evaluated a 10-year capital plan on maintaining our art and repairing our art. A fund like this that's set aside that people can contribute to voluntarily. If we do have developers that choose not to do art on their building, they could take a percentage and put it into our fund. And this will allow us to maintain art, educate young artists in Kansas City, work on projects like we have starting this year with Downtown Council, which is Art in the Park, which this year will be at Washington Park starting this summer.
Okay.
The last slide I'll leave you with is talking a little bit about how Kansas City has a successful art program and how do you implement that across the board on all of our projects. And it's very consistent. It doesn't really matter if it's an art project for $50,000 or $7 million. The project's identified, we establish a scope and a committee is put together. We write an RFQP that goes out for a call for artists. This is uploaded to systems that have lists of artists all over the United States, and in fact some of these projects will have international interest. Once we have determined
how we're going to procure the artist, because we're commissioning an artist itself, and then we base the selection on their past work. So certain projects, we actually go ahead and hire an artist based on their past work. Sometimes that the artists come to us and we actually give them a stipend, and they come up with different examples of what they might do for the projects. And then once we decide on the artist, write a contract, and move forward, and it's three things. We're commissioning the artist, they're fabricating the art that's site-specific, and then we install the art.
Fantastic, thank you. There was something about establishing an art selection committee. Has that been done?
Every project has its own art selection committee.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
there's about 12 committees being established right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, strategy C and D had to do with implementing the city's ADA plan and then the training involved in that. So I'll turn it over to Meg Conger to talk about that.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and Assistant City Manager Rouse. We can you send it back on the other slide because we're not ready for elevator. I don't have a good slide for this one. I don't know if I'm up close enough. The city is continually working to make sure that we are meeting all the aspects of the settlement agreement. We're doing very well. Some examples include working with city planning, land development, and engineers and designers of various firms, and working on curb ramp designs and pedestrian access routes. I also work with developers and sit on the mobility committee to make sure that we meet ADA standards on all of those projects. And another recent example would be working in collaboration with the KCATA on the Prospect Max curb ramps there. There's, I believe, 341 curb ramps on that project. So we're working with those. And I'm also on the committee for the Prospect Max Line Visually Impaired Wayfinding Technology Project, which is very exciting because we're going to be using state-of-the-art technology to help everyone with a visual impairment be able to use all of the features of the Prospect Max, and there's some real exciting technology in there. It's out for RFQ right now. Our grievance procedure that was set forth by the DOJ is working very well. We have had a few grievances up at KCI. I do want to stress they are not grievances that were caused by KCI personnel or KCI procedures. They are mainly grievances with airlines, the way airlines are handling things, and specifically with the way the wheelchair assistance companies are dealing with things. But they file the grievance with KCI, and so that falls under our grievance procedure, and we have to follow the procedures to handle those. We have one right now, but the other three that have been filed have all come to a successful resolution. So in whole, basically, we are meeting all of the requirements. For reasonable accommodation is another one, and we're bettering the city because of it. And I'll turn it over to Eric to talk about our very exciting new elevator project, which I think is going very well, and I hope you agree.
Thank you, Meg. Eric Bosch, City Architect. This project has gone way over our expectations on success. There's less wait times, the elevators are faster, and that's kind of a side note. We have 6 elevators in City Hall, and we're only using 5 of them right now for passengers. We designated 1 elevator for a service elevator, and so we've increased, we decreased waiting times, because the elevators are smart elevators. They know when you're going to a certain floor and you're grouped with someone that's going to a floor in your area. So for instance, if you're going to the 2nd floor, you're going to ride with people going to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor. If you're going to the 22nd floor, you're going to be grouped with people riding on those upper floors. So there's sometimes you might actually be in the elevator by yourself, where before you were stopping on 6 or 7 floors trying to get to your destination. The goal of the project was to make it more accessible for citizens that come to our building, or even city employees that are in the building that need additional assistance. So there's a button on the call station when you come in that will allow you to interact with the panel. It can be used for citizens or even city employees in a little bit more time. When you push that button, the doors don't shut and don't open as fast as they might. So you have a little bit more time of travel to get to your elevator without it shutting on you. Some more implementation that we haven't finished yet is then when you are on a floor, there'll be several things that will happen. It will ding when the elevator gets there, so people that are blind or just people not paying attention can know the elevator's there. And then it will also have a light that will come on so that you can see the light if you can't hear the ding. So we're very thrilled with how these are working out. I think that anybody that comes into City Hall will see that this is something new. Destination elevators will start being installed in newer buildings. In fact, I think some of the buildings that are being designed right now, people are coming to City Hall to see how they work.
Okay.
One of the things we hope you like is that you don't have to go to 26, push another elevator, and wait to go to 29. You don't get on an elevator that doesn't go to 29.
Yeah, I avoid those already. Yeah,
Now they
I
won't
found-
take you there.
Huh?
But now they won't take you there.
Yeah, I just avoid those two elevators anyhow. If they don't go to 29, I'd stay away from them. I let other people go on those other floors do it. But I appreciate the fact that it is faster. It does seem quicker and smoother, and you don't stop at 14 floors trying to get to one. That's a good deal.
Thanks.
Good job on that.
Our next slide is about our next City Hall project, which is the City Hall Core is what we have called it. And construction, we haven't mobilized yet, but we are working on it, and the mobilization will begin later this month. We're going to be working on several floors, and the areas that we will be addressing include bathrooms, break rooms, which the ADA has required us to do, and door levers. Some of the door levers you've seen in your office and in some other areas. The 5th floor has them all over because that was redone.
Good.
The bathrooms that we'll be addressing specifically are on the 26th floor and on the 10th floor. Those were chosen because we don't have to do all the bathrooms in City Hall, but those were very public, heavy bathrooms. And the 5th floor and the lower level are already completed. But we did choose the ones because the meetings are held on the 10th floor and the 26th floor. And other than the bathrooms on the lower level and the 5th floor, right now, we do not have ADA compliant restrooms. So we wanted to give the public something that they could use. Are there any questions about that project?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, great. Then we'll go on to the Starlight Geobond project.
Phase 1 of Starlight implementation was your route of travel. So we started addressing the parking lots first on making sure that there was accessible parking for not only just for the Starlight, but also for the shared parking lots between Parks and Rec and the zoo. The restrooms, concessions, some ramps that were repaired under Phase 1 are all wrapped up at this point. In 2020, in the fall, we will start construction on what we call the bowl, which is the seating area. And this will first address the large ramps that go down from the top of Starlight down to the stage area or the orchestra seating. And how we're accomplishing that is we're taking out certain areas and making them flat, so there won't be a continuous ramp that goes from the top to the bottom. The seating currently, if you're seating in an area that you're in the wheelchair area, if you're seated behind them in a regular seat, you cannot see over them. So that's one thing we're addressing by raising the back of the house seats. We're raising those up. So then we'll build a platform where the wheelchairs will be positioned. And this allows us also to have seating in all different pay scales, I'll call it, for citizens that need to come in a wheelchair or their companion comes with them. We want everybody to be able to have the same experience no matter where they sit in the Starlight Theater.
That is also required by federal law, that you have seats, it's called vertical and horizontal disbursement. You have to have good vertical and horizontal disbursement so that they have seats in every price range as well.
Good, okay.
So our schedule now is to start that construction when Starlight closes for the fall of 2020.
And how long is that
have it
going to take?
Reopen before they start their spring season of 2021.
Really?
Yep.
That's, okay. It seemed pretty extensive.
It does.
And it is extensive, but Starlight books their Broadway shows and some of their shows 3 years in advance, and we can't
You
mess
can't
up their
interfere with
contracts,
it.
so we've got to get it done.
Gotcha.
So we'll get it done.
All right.
Our last information that we have is the ongoing employee training, which was also a DOJ requirement. And some of you took the training with Mr. Jim DeYoung when he came here a few years ago and gave 24 live sessions. We trained about 2,000 city employees through those live sessions, but we have to continually train new employees every month when they get hired. So what Troy Stenholm in General Services has devised for us, and he did this some time ago, is a system where new employees watch a video of one of the sessions of Mr. DeYoung, and that's him right there, giving a training session. They don't have the chance to do Q&A, but they get a really great training session for those of you who remember. And it talks about ADA awareness, courtesy, serving someone with a disability, which is very important for our employees, as well as an understanding of the law. And when the employee takes that training, when they're completed, it sends an email to myself, an automatic email, which I then keep in electronic files. Because if we're ever asked to produce that, and that is one of the things the DOJ says, you have to keep these on file, I can always do that. It also records it in PeopleSoft so that HR has that recording as well, so they know that the training has taken place, and we can always look it up. The HR liaisons are the ones who get notifications and say these employees need training. They're sent the link goes to the employee. So it's sounds real complicated, but it's actually not, and it works very well. So that keeps all of our employees trained with ADA awareness, and they get to see one of the top ADA officials and experts in the country give the training, and it's a 2-hour training. The cities who are now undergoing settlement agreements and who have undergone them in the past few years are required to give 6 to 8 hour trainings. So we hit the right time because ours only has to be 2 hours.
Okay.
And I think that's all we have under ADA. Do you have any questions?
No, I think we're good. You've done a good job on keeping things moving on that, and I appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome. Had good support.
No doubt.
So objective 2, develop environmentally sound and sustainable infrastructure strategies. We have several strategies in here that relate to sustainability. The metrics are one of which is greenhouse gas emissions, which we'll be talking about quite a bit. Just up front, I've got strategy C, which is listed in the plan for this year, but as of the last meeting, we did talk about this being complete around identifying and investing in greenfield areas. And so a lot of the work around that will carry forward to an updated comprehensive plan, which I believe is in another KCStat, I think in Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development. First up to talk about is strategy A, which is about developing a climate resiliency plan. So I'll turn it over to Dennis Murphy with the Office of Environmental Quality to talk about the city's work.
Thank you. So the next slide will show you that our next step is to seek funding to support development of a climate resilience plan. We've got a couple of things that we're working on simultaneously. Dr. Archer, the director of the Health Department, and I intend to meet with the Health Forward Foundation to explore the possibility of them partnering with us on what's called a Partners for Places grant that's offered twice a year. It's a collaboration between the Urban Sustainability Directors Network and a national consortium of foundations called the Funders Network, whereby they solicit applications that involve a collaboration between a local government sustainability director and a local place-based foundation. They will match the funding dollar for dollar up to $75,000 for a 1-year project, up to $150,000 for a 2-year project, so $150,000 to $300,000 depending on the time frame. They do a solicitation twice a year. We are hopeful that we can find some interest with Health Forward, that we can begin working with them in anticipation of a solicitation coming out probably in July for awards to be made in September that would provide us with a funding source for moving forward on development of a climate resilience plan that would be heavily weighted and focused on not only municipal operations, but also our most vulnerable neighborhoods, particularly low-income neighborhoods, with a strong emphasis on the impacts of climate on public health. A couple of other opportunities that we're looking at is we're going to be working with City Plan Department as they begin looking at updating the focus plan, the city's comprehensive plan, and incorporating climate and sustainability into the overall fabric of the focus update. Another initiative that's underway right now that we're partnering with is a group called the Metro Kansas City Climate Action Coalition. That is a group of elected officials from across the metropolitan area, heavily weighted right now actually in Johnson County on the Kansas side of the line. But it's a metro area-wide initiative that is looking at developing a regional climate action plan that would address both greenhouse gas reductions as well as climate resilience, and anticipates doing a regional greenhouse gas inventory, and we're working with them and trying to support that effort, and we'd like to see that. That was actually one of the things that we hoped would happen when we got involved in climate action when we adopted our plan back in 2008, was that it would take off and become more of a metro area-wide initiative. And it's really exciting to see some young elected officials beginning to embrace that concept and push that agenda forward. So if we go to the next slide, we're looking at updating and implementing the city's climate protection plan to include some items that have been identified, such as the use of the Envision Sustainability Infrastructure Rating System and other measures. So our most recent update to our greenhouse gas inventory, which is the way we monitor progress towards achieving the goals in our climate protection plan, was through the end of calendar year 2017. And you can see on this slide, it shows what the greenhouse gas emissions are community-wide in years 2000, which is our baseline year, 2005, 13, and 17. As a reminder, our greenhouse gas reduction goals in our climate protection plan were a 30% reduction compared to our baseline year of 2000 by calendar year 2020. You can see that our climate protection plan was adopted in 2008. So we actually found between 2000 and 2005, before we adopted the climate protection plan, we were going in the wrong direction. Emissions were going up. So we had a very steep decline that we needed to make in order to get from where we were in 2005 to where we want to be in 2020. I'm pleased to say that we've seen significant progress in 2013 and 2017. We've actually seen a 21% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions community-wide compared not to 2005, but compared to that baseline year of 2000. So we actually saw about a 8 to 9% increase between 2000 and 2005. So we've made fairly striking progress since we began implementing the plan in 2008. We need to make obviously significant additional progress in order to achieve our 2030 goal. One of the things that gives me great hope is that one of the primary factors that we've seen that's resulted in progress on our greenhouse gas reductions has been a strong partnership with Kansas City Power and Light. So a significant part of the community as well as municipal operations greenhouse gas emissions are our use of electricity and energy in general, but electricity in particular. What we've seen is that over the years since we have been working in this area, the fuel mix used by KCP&L to generate our electricity has gotten progressively cleaner. They have shut down coal-fired power plants, they fuel switched coal-fired power plants to natural gas, and they have increased the amount of renewable energy generation that comprises their portfolio. I was actually at a meeting with Chuck Hazley from Kansas City Power and Light a couple of days ago, where he indicated they were very much committed to continuing that trend. They have plans for further wind energy development, and they also are hoping to get away from about another 1,500 megawatts of coal-fired generation. So having that kind of a partnership with our investor-owned utility has helped us, as well as a lot of emphasis that we placed on trying to promote energy efficiency, which KCP&L has also been a very good partner in trying to promote energy efficiency. Because you can see from looking at the graphs that the primary source of greenhouse gas emissions community-wide is from our consumption of building energy, residential, commercial, and industrial, and then transportation continues to account for other significant portions. So we're on track, and we're hopeful that we will actually be at or very close to our community-wide goal by 2020. So we go to the next slide. The story's even better when we look at municipal operations. Again, the same goal, a 30% reduction by calendar year 2020 compared to a baseline year of 2000. The difference is that even before we had a climate protection plan, we were on the right track. We were already reducing greenhouse gas emissions, not in order to meet climate goals, but because we were trying to save money by implementing energy efficiency measures in our buildings and other operations, switching to alternative fuels in our fleet. And so we actually were making progress. We had seen a reduction between 2000 and 2005, and we've seen even further progress since then. I'm very pleased to indicate at the end of 2017, we've achieved a 40% reduction goal towards what was remembered, as I mentioned, a 30% goal that we hope to achieve by 2020. So we're actually ahead of target. So as we take a look at updating our climate protection plan, one of the things that we need to figure out is what our new goal is going to be for municipal operations. So again, you can see the distribution, and it's even more pronounced that the consumption of electricity is overwhelmingly the dominant factor in greenhouse gas emissions for municipal operations. But you can see it has changed from contributing to 303,000 metric tons in 2000 down to 169,000 metric tons in 2017. And we are anticipating even further progress as we will talk about in just another minute. The next slide talks about climate protection plan update. Again, I mentioned we'll be updating our targets, and we are presently involved in conversations with KCP&L on the possibility of the city procuring 100% of the electricity for municipal operations from renewable energy generation. They got approval from the Public Service Commission to offer 100% renewable energy to their largest customers. Kansas City, Missouri is KCP&L's largest single customer. And so we are currently evaluating an agreement and hope to be in a position to come to Mayor James and the City Council sometime in the next month with a proposal for the city manager to sign on to an agreement to procure 100% of the electricity for municipal operations from a to-be-constructed wind farm. If we do that, the consequences are that not only will we have already achieved a 40% greenhouse gas reduction by 2017, but with the hope that that new wind farm would be constructed and operational either by the end of 2020 or early 21, we are within sight of achieving a bigger long-term goal, which is an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And when you look and see that even in 2017, our emissions from municipal operations is over 70% from consumption of electricity. If you convert that to zero greenhouse gas emissions from that sector, we become one of the most carbon-free communities in the country in terms of our municipal operations. And we also make significant progress, again, on that community-wide front, because the city actually represents about 2 to 3% of all the citywide greenhouse gas emissions. So with the progress and emissions that are occurring on the energy side, one of the things as we look at updating our plan going forward is that we'll need to focus even more heavily on the transportation side, which will be the largest source of emissions. It continues to be a large source citywide as well as in municipal operations. And the kind of things that we'll be looking at will be continuing our synchronization of traffic signals to reduce idling and stop and go traffic, converting to more electric vehicle usage in the area. More and more major car manufacturers are committing to going all electric in their fleets within the next decade or two. And we will also continue to work with our transit partners to try to promote greater utilization of transit, and then also looking at land use recommendations that would contribute to it. And that's where, again, looking at the focus plan will come into play. We actually had a meeting of our Climate Protection Steering Committee last Friday, and they passed or actually voted to support a resolution that will be in the Finance and Governance Committee tomorrow. That's Resolution 18,100, which directs us to move forward on several of the clean energy initiatives, including the 100% renewable energy, and has some deadlines and commitments of time frame that we'll be meeting. So we'll have further information on that going forward. Electric vehicles is a big issue. And one of the interesting new projects that just got approved for funding from the Department of Energy is our local nonprofit, the Metropolitan Energy Center, received a grant for what's called streetlight charging in city rights-of-way. And the objective of that is to expand the availability of electric vehicle charging at low cost in urban settings. The focus of their 3-year project is to create a model for building out affordable EV charging networks using the existing electric infrastructure on our city streetlights in order to provide on-street EV charging with a goal that will help make charging accessible to residents of multifamily housing and more accessible and affordable to low-income residents of our community. Number of partners in that, including the Public Works Department, Metropolitan Energy Center, the Regional Clean Cities Coalition, the Missouri University of Science and Technology in Rolla, KCPNL, a number of other partners, including the Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Lab in Boulder. So we're excited about that project and look forward to moving forward. Sherry, do you have anything more you want to add from Public Works standpoint on that?
I think it's just going to be an interesting test pilot to see how we're going to work it out with our street light system in a more residential setting.
Can't you just run an extension cord?
That would be a good plan. No, it's just the difference, the assumptions and how we have power and what the wiring is to our street light system. I think that there's some concerns or upgrades that will have to happen to make this work.
Dennis, do you know if we're requiring new development to install EV charging stations in their parking garages?
Not to my knowledge.
Yes, we are.
Oh,
We are?
We are.
Good.
Okay. And is there a formula for how many?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, so for example, if there's 200 parking spaces, we have any formula for how many charging stations need to be there or anything like that? Number per resident, nothing?
Not that I'm aware of. I'd have to check for sure.
Will you?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Please.
All right.
Thanks, Dennis.
The last strategy here, I think, Dennis, you already sort of touched on this.
Already
Just
touched
about the
this. Yeah, we're going to be working on our potential agreement with KCPNL. The other thing that they got approval from the Public Service Commission for is called a solar subscription rider. That would provide both residential and commercial customers an opportunity to voluntarily subscribe to electricity that would be produced from what KCPNL hopes will be a new 5 megawatt community solar farm. We are working with them to potentially evaluate possible city property where they might construct that. For a 5 megawatt solar farm, they need somewhere between 20 and 25 acres that has good solar exposure. And they would like to do that project in a location that is highly visible so that it makes people aware that solar energy is available in Kansas City. In order to go forward with that project under the tariff that was approved by the Public Service Commission, they actually have to have subscribers for 90% of that capacity, so 4.5 megawatts. And according to what I've been told by KCPNL, They have put information out on their website and encourage soft subscriptions, and they are at about 4 megawatts of soft subscription already. So that one looks like a project that will go forward. The idea is that there will be a slight premium that people will pay. Probably a residential customer might pay an extra $5 to $10 a month to subscribe to solar electricity, solar generated electricity. The idea is that KCP&L over time will see the cost as they expand that capacity come down so that it will get hopefully down to parity with buying it off the grid, which will then make it available potentially to all residents of Kansas City.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so following up on talking about greenhouse gas emissions in city facilities and community-wide, we have a strategy that's new to the business plan about reducing greenhouse gas emissions in city fleet, but not really new to the city, just newly incorporated into the plan. And along with that, we have a new person at KCStat, Dan Williams, who's over our fleet, who's going to talk a little bit about current makeup of our fleet and the trajectory of that.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Morning.
Mr. Assistant City Manager, I'm Dan Williams, the new municipal fleet guy. You can probably best think of me as Sam version 2.0. It'll make things go easier. We are commissioned internally to allow all these people to do their work to serve a common interest, and that's, you know, the widow living on fixed income at 38th and Agnes. And to do that, of course, we've got a bunch of choices to make internally as far as what best serves that need and keeps these people mobile. It's a balance continually, but we have, over the years, of course, chased alternative fuels since 1996, I believe. I have some record in the history. Which is when we first implemented CNG in the city fleet. And we continue to explore avenues to best do this in the most economical fashion, allowing us to further our, our work among our constituency with the least impact possible, both financial and environmental. In commercial applications currently, there are really only 4 fuels that can be considered for mobile assets, and they are electric, diesel, gasoline, and compressed natural gas in no particular order. But I will address a order going through them, if I may, and that is starting with electric. It is probably, honestly, the cleanest of all the available fuels right now. However, that cleanliness comes at a price. In the equipment we can get it in, it by and large carries a 50% pricing premium over what a conventionally fueled vehicle would be. And that is, figure if you buy a passenger car for $20,000 that's conventional fuel, an electric one's gonna cost you $30,000. The other thing which fights us on deployment, and I've worked pretty extensively with Dennis's group on this, trying to figure out how best to address this, is smaller vehicles right now are the only thing it's really viable in. They're the only vehicles that put enough, or put so little strain on the batteries that you can actually operate them for a period of time before they require recharging. Gasoline is, well, actually compressed natural gas is really the next cleanest one. It is, as I said, the second cleanest one. What has fought us on deploying it is it's costly. To refit a light truck with it is about a $14,000 upcharge. To do a heavy truck with it is about a $40,000 upcharge. But because of that, we had historically thrown natural gas at a variety pack of equipment, but we established some costing standards, and the ROI presented on this equipment really favors heavy vehicles. And there's a reason for that. They consume so much fuel, figure an average of 2 to 5 miles to the gallon in use, that it's much easier to pay off this cost differential during the course of the vehicle and actually earn on it on the back end of its life cycle. So that's where we've concentrated the efforts with CNG now, is in the commercial larger equipment.
Refitting or buying new?
Buying new.
Do you still have the cost premium on natural gas to the same extent that you have on electric? 50% higher too?
It's in the class of asset we're deploying it in. It'd be single and tandem axle big trucks. In that class of vehicle, a conventionally fueled single axle truck will cost you $95,000 versus $135,000 for CNG. In the tandem, it'll be $120 versus $165.
It's still a pretty big markup.
Yeah.
One of the things worth noting, though, is that Fleet Services has been exceptionally successful in securing federal grant funds to fund both the infrastructure to support natural gas as well as the incremental cost of the vehicle. So there has not been that much incremental cost to the city because of their work in chasing after other funding.
There's truth to that. I have an individual who is functionally our grant administrator internally, and right now we have 5 grants working, seeking out federal funds for various things.
Probably ought to jump on that before this new climate panel takes place.
Yeah. So the next cleanest is gasoline. Its advantages, it's functionally cleaner than diesel, but it's not as clean as the 2 alternative fuels. But it incrementally has been getting cleaner over the years, so we are favoring it towards our lighter work vehicles, as well as the passenger car SUVs that aren't feasible to target with electricity, because it's the best we can do right now as far as emissions output.
Okay.
And of course, diesel is the dirtiest of them. And we're trying to displace as much of that as possible. We'll see in later slides that even old school fleet management tended to replace light trucks with diesel operated units. And that day is done. Diesel has so many disadvantages now that where you can avoid it, you're best off avoiding it. So it's very dirty fuel. It's highly expensive to maintain the equipment. And by and large, the reason for that is the new emission standards adopted in 2008 for road diesel, Tier 4, require special apparatus on the rear end of the engine to purify it. And this technology works pretty good in over-the-road applications, but not in low-usage, high-idle municipal applications.
Okay.
So it's always being repaired. And you'll find that fuel most commonly in big trucks, particularly in our fleet, because it has a very high torque potential. And of course, it takes that to run them.
When do you anticipate that the majority of our fleet will be flipped to alternatives of one sort or another?
It's a moving target. And it may be in the slide, my intended goal is that on what I would call our cookie cutter big trucks, which are dump trucks, crew trucks, things like that. We build a lot of. I ultimately would like all of those on compressed natural gas right now, and I'll elaborate on that in a little bit, because it's the most maintenance friendly and cheapest to operate for our departments. It's also the cleanest we've got in that weight of vehicle.
Okay.
Light trucks, we cannot escape gasoline right now. because there is no technology which has wedged its way into that segment to allow us to do it. We're kind of waiting on better battery technology to be able to deploy full electric or hybrid in that class of vehicle. So I'm contingent on R&D in in the automotive community to be able to take advantage of something yet. So it's hard to forecast when we can actually get there.
Okay.
Next slide, please. This will point out probably more than anything why we're doing what we're doing. Light work vehicles. For sake of this slide, I broke down our equipment into the light work vehicles are vehicles under 20,000 pound gross weight rating. So this is like your F550s on down. Anything which does not have a passenger car focus. In other words, it's a tool carrier, it pulls mowers or stuff like that. So we have 804 of those currently. Off-road equipment is our second biggest catch-all, and it's a variety pack of forklifts, loaders, mowers, anything that consumes fuel that's utilized in off-road productivity. And heavy work vehicles is that classification I was telling about where we're favoring CNG. And 551 of those currently. And that's anything from 20,000 pound gross weight up to legal maximum. 206 sedans and 202 SUVs. And SUVs are favored where we have need for four-wheel drive for all-weather responsiveness. Is why that selection. If you look over at the right column, you'll see the bulk of our equipment is gasoline, followed by diesel. Compressed natural gas is going up. LP had been somewhat stagnant in our industrial applications like forklifts. However, Parks and Rec chose to deploy 24 LPG mowers last year, retiring some diesel-powered units, so that helps with that. Electric is a variety pack of, we have a small cache of electric vehicles, but also industrial applications such as forklifts and scissor lifts and what have you. And we do have a handful of hybrids as well. So the next slide. I asked that Kate insert this because I wanted to show that we've been actively pursuing this all along functionally. But as I said, gasoline is displacing a lot of what had been diesel. And if you look at this light work vehicle slide on the left, you'll see that diesel's going down, gasoline's going up. You'll also see, however, the compressed natural gas is going down and gasoline's going up. And again, that's that cost factor. Functionally, we haven't been able to drive them enough to pay off the cost differential. Conversely, you look at the heavy truck by fuel type, you see where diesel count's going down and compressed natural gas is going up dramatically. So, we're trying to lessen not only our carbon footprint, but particularly with diesel, there's advantages to just general air quality. We've hovered dangerously close at non-obtainment by EPA standards as far as their rating of cities, and almost had to do some mitigation a couple of times. So anything the city can do to minimize that impact, industry as well, is to our advantage. So that's our focus. Last slide indicates some financials. The cost savings derived from doing this and the greenhouse gas reduction that we've obtained so far. Of course, our long-term goal, I mentioned, is to, in our bigger cookie cutter trucks, to go to CNG away from diesel as much as possible. We are challenged in that. We have functional ability to fill these things in the middle city and in the close metro north, and that's about it. We don't have filling facilities south, like at the coal mine public works district, or up north from Russell Road, or so we have tremendous geographical areas where we cannot penetrate with that fuel yet. So, and the infrastructure is expensive to put in. We continually secure grants where possible. We currently have a DOE one working that's getting ready to go to ordinance, in which is a 10-unit chunk of full electric vehicles for neighborhoods, which will, their inspectors, it'll start deploying electric in that application. Kind of a pilot program to see how it does, see what user acceptance is and what have you. It would seem on the surface to be a perfect application because they're centrally domiciled. They come in at night, they can plug them in, they're ready to go in the morning, and they have limited drive range. So we'll continue looking at those options where they're available. For right now, we'll continue moving light trucks from diesel to gasoline as we replace them. And that is, I would consider that an interim step. Like I said, at some point, alternative technology will come along which is viable and makes other stuff feasible, but we don't have it right now. And of course, we'll continue to look at other electric and hybrid technologies for any of our vehicle classifications as they come due for change.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
So we have just two remaining strategies about the Smart Sewer Program in this objective, and then our quick workforce objective. So Andy Shively couldn't be with us today, so we have Priya Iyengar here to speak to the two strategies under Smart Sewer. The first one is about modifications to the consent decree.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, and everybody else in this room. My name is Priya Iyengar. Today I'm representing Andy Shively, Special Assistant City Manager. He is currently in Tennessee attending WEF Utility Manager Conference.
Sounds like a boondoggle.
He's talking about how great we are, how smart we are as a city. Today I'm going to run through the slides that you probably would recognize from the KCStat presentation in September 2018. So we are in the third consent decree modification phase. For those folks tuning in for the first time, our consent decree originally was signed in 2010, September of 2010, where we agreed to bring in water quality improvements and hopefully be in compliance with the Clean Water Act. We are in the third modification, and the purpose of this third modification is to reduce heavy financial burden on ratepayers by reducing the overall size of the program, reduce the size of future utility rates that the City Council is willing to approve, expand the use of green infrastructure technology citywide to maximize the benefits to the community, integrate planned public infrastructure improvements to prioritize cities' infrastructure investments, and finally to optimize overflow control performance criteria to avoid investing in overflow control measures with diminishing community benefits. Moving on, this is new information. We hosted this, if you can go to the next slide, please, thank you. So we hosted the 7th annual capital improvements rollout. This was the day after President's Day. We had a record attendance, having more than 400 attendees, including engineering firms, construction contractors, of course, city officials. Individual city departments, including Architect's Office, Aviation Department, Parks and Recreation, Public Works, KC Water, and Smart Sewer Program provided all the projects that were listed in fiscal year 20. This was really good information. We handed out a booklet that I have with me to show it to you guys, and hopefully you all have a copy of this. This is also available on the city website. We shared about, all the individual departments shared about $522 million investments planned that equates to 10,000 plus jobs according to Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is fantastic. Well, in the picture there, that was Andy Shavley, that is my boss. He's here even though he's not here.
He looks a little cleaner in the photograph.
He looked sharp. Moving on, this is the report card, which probably Andy could address it much better. All that graph shows is to the y-axis, we have dollars and billions, and on the x-axis, it runs from 2010 when the consent decree was signed all the way to 2035, which is the 25-year plan. The green curve shows you what we have planned, what we have budgeted throughout the program, to $4.7 billion, and the numbers for CIP budget that we are in 2019, and the contracted amount, we are currently on schedule and on budget. That's all that graph shows us. Moving on. In this table, the first column provides you with all the different elements within the program, all the categories. The next column provides the number of projects in those categories, the budget that we've allocated on the third column, active or completed projects on the fourth column, and lastly, what we've contracted to date. The numbers on the table are updated from the last time, so that's the new information that we have.
Good.
Moving on to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about, in the next few slides, I'll talk a little bit about the inflow and infiltration reduction on the private side, and this is in the separate sewer system basin. So the map to your left, to my left and to your left, I guess, is the area north of the river. The spots, the colored spots right in the middle are targeted areas that we're focusing on reducing the inflow and infiltration. Map to the right is south of the area. It looks a little busy, which only shows that there is that much amount of work that is getting done and that needs to be done. The call-outs, the ones in blues, show active projects. So basically, the targeted spots have several different projects within those areas, and the call-outs show which ones are complete and which ones are active. Moving on to the next slide. So the private I&I is, the name of the program is Keep Out the Rain, which Andy probably talked about in the last meeting. It is a data-driven program. It's a 5-year program started, we are in year 3 right now. We have identified a total of 70,000 properties that are eligible within the program. Basically, we have engineers going out to buildings evaluating what are the sources that are connected, which are prohibited according to the city ordinance that was signed in 2015. So we've identified 70,000. Since we're in year 3, the pie chart to the right shows how many we've completed so far. So 47% of that 70,000 is complete, and 53% is those are upcoming evaluations. This is a voluntary program, and having the opportunity today, I would highly encourage whoever's watching to sign up for the program. It is free that the city is doing, so I would take full advantage of it. If you want to know, if the residents want to know if they belong to the project area, if they are in the project area, they can go to the website and look up their addresses to figure out if they belong to the project area or not.
Which website?
Our city website?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And the city website / what is it, water/keep out the rain?
I should
Because,
probably put
sometimes
that
the
on
city
the slide.
website isn't the most easy to navigate.
I believe I have done this myself. I've tried to search in the search button on the city website and entered the name of the program. It takes me right to the link.
Okay, good.
kcmo.gov/rate.
Thank you.
Okay, good. There you go.
Moving on to the next slide. Now, this shows a trend of all the measures on that program. The top one and the best one is probably customer satisfaction, which is 99%, and it's been stable. Cost effectiveness has also been stable. The two items that I want to focus on is the flow removed, which is increasing, and participation, which we want for it to increase. So flow removed to date is 25 million gallons per day. Total savings, we are at 52.5%. And our participation is 59%, which of course we want that to increase. So if you total 59, 36, and 5, it equates to 100%. We've only had 5% refusal so far.
Good. All right.
This is my last slide. We are collecting a ton of data. Last year we went from 80 gigabytes to 5.4 terabytes. That's a lot of data, including manhole inspections, CCTV data, and a lot of smart technology that we've implemented, including real-time data collection. So having all this data is important, and having it tell us a good story so we can adapt our program, adapt our technology for a cost-effective implementation is where we're heading towards.
Okay.
That, I'll try to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, I don't have any questions, but please thank Andy for supplying me with some visuals for a talk that I did down in Orlando with Mueller Water that I think went well. And I saw some of the visuals here that he had allowed me to borrow. So thank you guys for doing that. The reason that I did it was because they wanted to have us talk about our smart sewer and our water system. And once again, I think we're leading the way in some of those areas. So thank you very much for the effort.
I will convey that. Thank you.
Okay, last objective is to increase and support local workforce development and minority women and locally owned businesses. We've got the metrics up front here, and we actually have a couple of charts in there as well. These are the same as last year, or the same as the last meeting, since they include FY18. So we'll go on to the first strategy, which is about improving communication around the HRD's programs. Turn it over to Philip Yelder to talk about that.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Philip Yelder, HRD. Thank you for this opportunity once again to bring you all some updates in terms of some of the activities taking place in the Human Relations Department. Beginning with the communications efforts that Kate slide we're looking at here now. One of our strongest means of getting the word out to our local minority women-owned business is basically through our email system. I mean, with the database, we're able to connect with them on a regular basis about upcoming opportunities, not only here in Kansas City, but we receive a lot of correspondence from some of our partners in other parts of the city and other parts of the state that we were able to communicate that to them as well. So they're seeing opportunities not only here locally, but in certain places like St. Louis, and even in certain places outside of the state. Oklahoma, you mentioned Oklahoma City. They have worked with our office a lot in terms of finding minority women-owned business to work on programs in their community and within their city. We have still an ongoing discrimination campaign, Report It, Don't Ignore It. You may have seen that sometime on some of the KCATA buses. We've had billboards throughout the city where we're encouraging our residents, if they believe they have been discriminated against, to report it to our department, and we will start the investigation with that. We also have outreach initiative with the Hispanic community. We have one ongoing radio show that we do once a month, as well as one of their community television station, Univision, where we have a segment there in which we talk about initiatives and upgoing opportunities not only within the department, but also about some of the things that are taking place within City Hall and city government. We're definitely trying to bridge the gap between city government and the community, and trying to give them more of a comfort level and trying to report some of these alleged activities that may be taking place. Next, one of the things we're talking about is solicitation based on scope of work, which what I talked about just briefly, email correspondence, notification, workshops with our partners about upcoming projects activity. As you know, we've been involved with the KCI initiative, working with Edgemoor and similar groups, also with Cerner and their team, as well as the Downtown Hotel. Some of the major projects with upcoming workshops, explaining the projects, communicating where those opportunities are for our minorities and women-owned businesses. So one of the initiatives that we had within the last fiscal year, we talked about the MWBE ordinance. As you know, we spent a lot of time finally getting that ordinance updated through council. But some of the significant changes in that ordinance was for some of the individuals that may be listening was the self-performance work that now minorities and women-owned businesses will be able to obtain credit for work that they self-perform towards meeting the overall project goals. As another feature was both the dual certification for minorities and women, females that can now be certified as both an MBE or as well as a WBE on qualified participation project. We've also added a personal net worth threshold that was not there before. That provision does not kick in though until October of 2019. So this year,
Is it a threshold or cap?
it's the threshold will be the right now is 1.3. 1.3.
You have to have a personal net worth of 1.3
Does
in
not
order to
exceed.
participate?
Does
So
not
it's
exceed.
a cap. It's
Yes,
not a
yes,
threshold.
yeah.
Threshold means you got to have it to get in. So that
It's a
needs to
cap.
be changed.
Yes,
Okay.
we'll change that. The other one of the other changes that we made in the program was the time for an applicant to be in business. Usually it was 1 year. It's been reduced from 1 year now to 6 months. And then another area that was important for the program was the counting the participation credit for suppliers, which are going from 25% to 6% in the overall program. Next slide. So one of the initiatives that we're currently working on now, Mr. Mayor, is the construction workforce disparity study. We're winding that down. We probably have about another month, maybe a month and a half before the final report will be available. But as you know, the report was looking at, and the study was looking at overall, what is the actual availability of minorities and women's in the Kansas City, Missouri workforce area. So part of we looked at the midterm report, kind of got an idea in terms of what the availability looks like, and we're also kind of working through some of the recommendation that will come forth that will be worked with the Construction Workforce Board and with the community stakeholders as we come up with a framework to present to you all and to council about some recommendation to help change and improve that.
Thank you.
And one of the last items we've been working on is this still a local preference program. During the passing of the MWB ordinance, one of the things that came out of there from council was a local business enterprise program. And so that was a resolution passed by council authorizing the city manager to develop a local business enterprise program. So we've been working now with about 8 or 9 community stakeholders on this initiative. We've had at least 2 or 3 meetings regarding that, and we're close to coming up with some recommendation that the group can be able to present as an overall effort to the council about changes or initiatives for this local business enterprise.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
That takes us to the end. Thanks, everybody, for sticking around a little bit past time. And I think we're right up to, at noon, there's a budget presentation. So we'll close it out. Thanks.
Thanks.